What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the pod. UFC 322. It just wrapped up. A lot to talk about with this card. This was coming in what I thought was going to be the card of the year. It on many fronts very much delivered, and on many fronts kind of disappointed, especially with that main and co-main event. We'll get into all of it. Before I do, as always, I'll keep it brief. Thank you if you are listening to the pod. I do appreciate every single view, every single viewer, and I appreciate all the love that I get on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, wherever. I do appreciate it. And yeah, let's just jump right in. I don't want to waste any time. Della Maddalena, Islam Makhachev. This is the main event of the evening. Many people came in thinking this was the JDM disrespect. Islam was a 3-1 favorite coming in. And truth be told, this was one of the more one-sided title fights we've seen in a while. The only other one that comes to mind is Khamzat Chimaev against DDP, which was probably even more one-sided than this. But it just shows, man, that these guys like Khamzat, like Islam, when you have this elite top-tier grappling, it doesn't matter who you put in front of them, right? They're just so good, and they're so automatic in Dagestan. And really, outside of Umar's loss to Merab in January, the whole Khabib gym has just been undefeated, unstoppable. Usman and Bellator, Umar, Islam, Khabib, obviously. It's truly, you watch this main event, and it's hard to not be a little frustrated because it was so one-sided and there wasn't a ton going on. But you have to give Islam Makhachev his props. He just went out and completely manhandled a guy who rightfully deserved to have the belt, right? JDM wasn't not a title caliber guy, but Islam's just that dude. And he moved up a weight class, which they showed the stat on the broadcast is not a very successful thing for fighters. And we saw that in the co-main event with how Valentina just completely dominated Zhang Weili, and we'll get into that in a bit. But moving up a weight class is a really hard thing to do in MMA, more than any other sport, especially boxing. Because boxing, you have weight classes every 4 pounds, and the grappling aspect is not a thing. Moving up a weight class in mixed martial arts is unbelievably difficult. That's why we give so much praise to the DCs of the world, to the Henry Cejudos of the world, to the Pereiras, to now the Islams of the world. Because it's just such an unbelievably hard thing to do. And what Islam did tonight is he came out, new division, and completely manhandled Della Maddalena. It wasn't even close. Della Maddalena landed one good combo the entire fight. And it was kind of an ugly up close, landed a couple to the body, uppercut. That was it. And it's really easy to get frustrated at Islam for being this guy who just grappled him, just held him down to the ground. But I feel in this fight, the fact that it was 5 rounds of Islam just completely wrestle effing Della Maddalena, I really think that was more of an attribute to JDM than it was to Islam, right? Because Islam is a finisher. We've seen this his entire career. He finishes fights. And what just ended up happening was Della Maddalena would get taken down with ease, but then was doing very well at defending the submissions, defending Islam switching positions on the ground. Right? Islam, there was a couple times it looked like he was going for a Darce. There was a couple times it looked like he was stepping over for either a Kimura or a straight arm lock. And Della Maddalena did excellent in defending it. And you could tell in camp, he spent a lot of time on his back defending that type of stuff. But I think what JDM underestimated and what his camp underestimated is just how hard it is to get up off the ground from Islam. Because throughout Islam's career, especially since he won the title against Charles, who's gotten up when they've been taken down by Islam? It never happens. It didn't happen in the Poirier fight. It didn't happen in the Volk fight. It obviously didn't happen in the Moicano fight. He got Darce before it could happen. It didn't happen in the Oliveira fight. When Islam puts you on your butt, you just don't get up. And that was something that I very deeply missed coming into this fight. I posted a clip on Instagram of me saying I thought for sure JDM would get up when he'd get taken down. I thought for sure because everything I'd seen from JDM this far proved to me that he could. But Islam's a different animal. He's a different cat. And sometimes you just get these fighters that are just special, and you get these athletes that are just special. And Islam Makhachev, just every time he goes out and performs, it's just apparently clear that he's just one of those chosen athletes that is just pretty much untouchable. And he has one loss on the record, and that was a fluky knockout win very early in his career. And honestly, as we've seen with fighters, and I'll talk more about Carlos Prates later, like Carlos Prates, getting that one loss off your back is usually very, very beneficial for guys because that weight of fighting undefeated, it looms very large in combat sports. And it's very hard to do in MMA, and there's a lot of pressure to keep that undefeated record in MMA. I don't know, like, for sure if that has anything to do with the run Islam's gone on, but, now he's tied for the longest UFC win streak in UFC history, and he's lost in the UFC. It's unreal. He's a different cat. Islam Makhachev's a different cat. When he takes people down, they just don't get up. And if the fight does end up getting up, he gets him back down immediately. And he's just unbelievable. And it's kind of a shame that he's such a top-tier grappler because as we saw tonight, Islam's striking is very good and his fight IQ is really good. I mean, the game plan, and that's partially attributed to his camp, but the game plan to calf kick Jack Della Maddalena like he did coming out of the gate was genius. Not just because calf kicks are an effective thing in MMA, but the big thing JDM had like in his arsenal coming into this fight was he's so good at switching stances and he's so good at moving around. He's got such good footwork. And when you calf kick a dude and you're making him hop around on one leg, it takes away both those things. Because, yeah, you can switch stances, but then it just makes you less effective moving around in general. Because if you have one compromised leg, it doesn't matter if it's your lead leg or your back leg. It's still going to be harder to move around, to have footwork, especially when you've got a dude like Islam shooting takedowns on you. So the calf kick was just genius game planning, and then Islam's ground game did the rest of the work, and there's no doubting how elite his ground game is. So just an unbelievable performance. For Jack Della Maddalena, man, it was definitely disappointing to see. He was grimacing throughout the fight, so I don't know if that was the calf or if he had hurt something else in the fight, because you'll see guys get hurt by calf kicks and stuff, but he was like really grimacing when Islam was like in top control, so I don't know if he maybe broke a rib or what happened. JDM's a tough guy. I don't think he will use that as an excuse because he literally broke his forearm against Gilbert Burns and then started elbowing him with that forearm to KO him. So for JDM, man, it's tough. It really is because he didn't, truth be told, he won the belt and then he just had to defend it the first time against a buzzsaw. And props to him for welcoming the challenge and everything, but Islam is that dude. And there's some guys in sports, we've seen it in other sports like with Tiger Woods in golf, Michael Phelps in swimming, Brady and Mahomes in the NFL. Like sometimes there's just these dudes in sports who are just untouchable, right? It doesn't matter who you throw at them. They just find a way to win. And to me, Islam is one of those guys where it's just like the amount of different challenges that they put at him and he just handles each and every one in dominating fashion is unbelievable. One last thing I want to say before I move on. I absolutely love Alexander Volkanovski, so that's part of the reason I'm saying this. Can we take a moment to appreciate how good Volk is for fighting the fight he did against Islam in their first matchup? Because nobody has ever put up a competitive fight like that against Islam. Like, yeah, sure, Dustin Poirier cut him and everything, but that was a complete domination. Islam was outstriking Dustin Poirier. Islam manhandled Moicano, manhandled JDM, manhandled Oliveira, and it's one of these things, man, where it's like Alexander Volkanovski is a 145er, and he's a short 145er at that. Obviously, he's stocky. He's meant for that weight class. But for him to do what he did against Islam, all the props in the world, because every single time that Islam wins, especially up a weight class at 170, which kind of looks like the weight class Islam's meant to stay at, it just makes that first Volk loss that was very close and arguably you could have given the fight to Volk, it just makes that loss for Volk that much better. And it's aged unbelievably well. And I really do think that this fight for Islam kind of cemented he needs to stay at 170. Because this is, granted, he didn't finish the fight like he has at lightweight, but in all of his lightweight fights, with the exception of, like, I guess the Moicano fight and the Oliveira fight, but, like, in a lot of his fights, he has shown, like, later in fights, he fades, right? There have been a lot of fights where Islam has gotten bloodied up, has gotten cut, knocked down late in fights. It happened against Poirier when he got cut. It happened against Volk when he got knocked down. And it's like, we've seen this with Islam before, where sometimes he doesn't fight a complete 25 minutes. But for him tonight, it just looked like he had infinite energy, and it really looked like the move to 170 was a natural one. I just don't think he moves back to 115, frankly. I just don't think. He looked so dominant at 170 tonight. The weight cut in the lifestyle is just easier. I think Islam is going to stay at 170 for a long time. And there is a lot of young, hungry contenders, many of which we'll talk about in a bit, that are in line to fight him. And, of course, Ilia Topuria. So, co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko defends her flyweight belt against Zhang Weili, another fight where all three of the scorecards were 50-45. This, to me, was an unbelievably entertaining performance by Valentina Shevchenko. And a lot of people will hate on it because it was a lot of top control, a lot of wrestling, similar to how Islam was against JDM. But this was truly a remarkable performance by Valentina Shevchenko, who, in my opinion, tonight, with this win, which you could argue is the best win of her career, at least against the best opponent of her career, cemented her as the women's cemented her as the women's MMA GOAT and as a top 10 UFC fighter all time, regardless of gender. Regardless of gender, I believe that Valentina Shevchenko is a top 10 MMA fighter of all time because what she has done at flyweight, with the exception of against one opponent in Alexa Grasso, and as we've seen in the UFC, everyone has that one opponent that just has their number, gets them at some point, and she still avenged that loss. What she has done in the women's flyweight division has been nothing short of remarkable because there has not been a single test that has been thrown her way that she hasn't taken care of or eventually taken care of in the Alexa Grasso case. Her game plan tonight, similarly to Islam's, I thought was just unbelievable, right? And she said it in the post-fight interview, Zhang Weili, even though she's coming up weight class, has unbelievable power in her hands. So she never fought her in boxing range. It was just fine. We're going to kick. And the second you get close, because I'm bigger than you and I'm stronger than you and this is my weight class, I'm going to take you down. And it was unbelievable. And a lot of people will look at all the top control time and all of the takedowns that Valentina Shevchenko got on Zhang Weili. I understand that. But Valentina Shevchenko, thoroughly outstruck Zhang Weili. And there are a lot of parallels between this main event and this co-main event tonight. Because in both fights, the person who won had a bunch of top control, but that top control wouldn't have been possible if they weren't fighting a good fight on the feet prior. Whereas Islam hurt JDM to the legs, Valentina Shevchenko just mauled Zhang Weili to the body, especially in round 4. There was a couple points in round 4 alone where I thought, dude, she could finish Zhang Weili right now. She could, because the body kicks, she threw this jumping front kick to the body and it was unbelievable. The knees to the body, oh my God, in round 1 or round 2, the step-in knee that Zhang Weili fell down because of. Valentina Shevchenko, I had thought, and one of my buddies, shout out Carson, had thought the same thing, and we were texting about it. It really felt like later in her career, she kind of isn't the same fighter she once was. She didn't I thought coming into this fight, she doesn't really have the speed and the striking that she once did. That is not the case, because tonight she looked faster than Zhang Weili, the fighter who is coming from a lighter weight class. It was just a masterful performance. The kickboxing, the body kicks, the counter punching, and then the second Zhang Weili got close, it was a takedown. And the most beautiful thing about Valentina Shevchenko's performance that I want to give all the credit to is she not once forced a takedown, right? She not once shot a takedown from distance. Every single time Valentina Shevchenko got Zhang Weili on the ground, it was because Zhang Weili came crashing in. And she used Zhang Weili's momentum and her crashing in as a way to get her on the ground. I thought that was just unbelievable. And that's such a good way to operate when you're as well-rounded of a mixed martial artist as Valentina Shevchenko is. So just an unbelievable performance. I was thoroughly impressed by Valentina Shevchenko. I'm even more of a fan than I already was because of this performance tonight. And next for Shevchenko, rightfully so, it should be Natalia Silva. Natalia Silva beat Alexa Grasso, obviously the girl who has a win over Shevchenko. And it's a different stylistic matchup because we've seen Shevchenko rule this division for so long. It's time that we give her. It's hard to keep when a contender is the champion for so long, right? And they go through contender after contender after contender, right? You always want something fresh. And the thing about Natalia Silva for Valentina Shevchenko is Natalia Silva is a fresh style, right? It's this karate type, like very light on the feet, a ton of movement, very fast, get out of there. And it will be really fascinating to see. And I think Valentina Shevchenko will use her wrestling if that matchup becomes reality. But that's the one matchup where I'm like, yeah, it could be a little unique. Erin Blanchfield got a win tonight against Tracy Cortez. I don't think she's next because, frankly, I just think Valentina would keep it on the feet and just completely outclass her. I think Natalia Silva's the one where it's like, okay, obviously the wrestling is the way to beat her, but she's so quick on her feet and she's got such good movement, it might make it difficult. That's a unique matchup, a fresh matchup. That's what I want to see next. And Zhang Weili, move back down to strawweight because tonight, no one is going to drop their stock on Zhang Weili because of tonight. Because we have seen fighters, this exact same thing happened to fighters. Moving up a weight class, the size difference is just too much. Right? It happened to Israel Adesanya when he was the reigning 185 champion. He moved up, fought Jan Blachowicz, and Jan kind of did similar to what Shevchenko did tonight. Just kind of like, yeah, I'm just too strong for you, and just kept taking him down. And that is a big deterrent of like, yeah, you don't need to stay at 125, Zhang Weili. We know how great you are. You tested greatness, and none of us blamed you for that. We all thought you deserved it. Go back to your weight class and add to your legacy even more. There is a champion already there waiting for you in Mackenzie Dern. That could be an interesting fight, and honestly, a favorable fight for Zhang Weili to get her belt back. So that's where I'm at with that. The main and co-main will get a lot of hate by the MMA fans. I thought the co-main was much more entertaining than the main event was, just from the simple fact I thought Valentina's game plan was just to a T perfect. Not to say that Islam's game plan wasn't awesome with the calf kicks, but Valentina Shevchenko, it's clear that she's the women's MMA GOAT, and she is a top 10 UFC fighter all time because she has every tool in the toolkit, right? She's not just a kickboxer, she's not just a Muay Thai champion anymore. She has every single tool in the toolkit. And for that, she is one of the greats, and appreciate her while you have her and appreciate Islam while you have him because, a card like tonight, we very well in 5 or 6 years could look back at this card and think, wow, we got to see Islam Makhachev and Valentina Shevchenko fight on the same card at Madison Square Garden, right? Because there's a good chance in 5 years, if it continues to trend the direction it is, we're talking about Islam as one of the greats and Valentina's already one of the greats. And we look back and say, wow, that's amazing. That was a privilege. We got to watch them on a card together, regardless of how entertaining the fights were, regardless of if they got finishes or not. So, unbelievable performance by Valentina, unbelievable performance by Islam. The rest of the main card was unbelievable, and we had a stretch of 4 brutal knockouts leading up to that co-main and main event. And we're going to talk about them all. Sean Brady, Michael Morales. Michael Morales TKO Sean Brady in round 1. This was a testament to, 1, how good welterweight is, but also just 2, how much Michael Morales has flown under the radar for being this super flashy, super fun striker. The UFC has kind of buried this guy on Apex cards forever now. And this was his first shot. Granted, he main evented an Apex card, but I would think that being the featured bout on a pay-per-view, especially at MSG, is a way bigger spot than main eventing an Apex card. And for him to do what he did against Sean Brady, who's looked basically untouchable as of recently, was just unbelievable. I mean, the game planning. I cannot get over how good the game planning for some of these fighters were. because Michael Morales came into this fight, and they mentioned it on the broadcast, immediately a much lower stance than he was used to, than we're used to seeing in Michael Morales. And we've never really seen him use that low stance that he was using against Brady tonight. And the reason for that is because, quite frankly, Sean Brady is one of the best grapplers in the UFC. You're not going to play with him. And that low stance made it difficult on Brady to get to his hips. He hardly even shot at all because Morales was keeping him at range so much. And the jab, the Michael Morales jab, was a thing of freaking beauty. The Michael Morales jab was beating Sean Brady up from the start, and it continued to open up the other weapons for Morales, and eventually, after a couple pretty heavy shots, it was one right hand that really rocked Brady. It was the beginning of the end. Just an unbelievable performance for a guy who, because of these Apex cards, has flown under the radar for so long. This was his first spot in front of a crowd on a pay-per-view, and now this dude's going to be in the top 3 of the welterweight division, just like that. And he's so young, he's so athletic, he's so talented, he's very marketable because he's got the whole Miles Morales stick. He even put on the mask after the fight tonight. This guy is a serious threat at 170 pounds, and the way that the division is right now, it is impossible to tell who's going to get the next title shot. But if it was Michael Morales, you cannot blame the UFC because he's very marketable. There were a ton of Ecuadorian fans at Madison Square Garden tonight. So just unbelievable performance by Morales. Just from the start, he just looked levels above Sean Brady, who's he is an elite 170-pounder, is Sean Brady. And Michael Morales just dispensed of him like it was no problem. So just an unbelievable performance. I can't speak any higher of Michael Morales. And I want to give some props to Sean Brady because Sean Brady went to London on short notice and beat up Leon Edwards earlier in the year. And that, at the time, should have cemented him as the number 1 contender because at the time, Leon was ranked 1 or 2. And Sean Brady was like, I don't care. I just want to fight. I want to prove that I'm the best. I just want to fight. And he took a fight against a guy who's much younger, much more athletic, and ranked lower, and said, I'm going to fight this guy. And even though it didn't end up going his way, you have to respect a guy like that who walks into the octagon and says he's going to fight like that. So really a ton of respect to Sean Brady, but tonight was Michael Morales' night, and it was an unbelievable performance. And let's just stay in the welterweight division because this next one was another KO from another welterweight. Leon Edwards, this might be the beginning of the end because Carlos Prates sent that dude to bed. Second round KO. It was a straight right on the button, dude. It was square on the chin. I haven't seen a knockout like that in a bit where a guy reacts the way Leon did because Leon literally got KO'd so hard he lost his footing, fell back, and his eyes rolled back into his head. It was a disgusting knockout by Carlos Prates. And I think what this fight showed is there is a new guard at welterweight right now. And if Islam's going to stay at welterweight and be the champion, you're going to have to deal with Michael Morales, and you're going to have to deal with Carlos Prates, and you're going to have to deal with Ian Gary, and you're going to have to deal with Shevchenko whenever he comes out of hibernation. This division is by far, I will not take any other argument for any other division. The welterweight division is the most talented division in the UFC. It is the deepest division in the UFC. And tonight was proof of it. And they did an awesome job, the UFC did, of putting all these welterweight fights on the same card. And then we get Bilal versus Ian Gary next week, which will be another big one. It was the Carlos Prates show in this one. And it was a left hand down the button. And in that first round, Leon took him down. And we've seen, right? It happened against Ian Gary. We've seen Carlos Prates. He will get taken down, right? It happens. But when you've got a dude that's this dangerous and also this relaxed, he's never in a rush. He has never panicked in the octagon. The moment's never too big for him. We've seen him now back-to-back pay-per-view cards. UFC's return to Chicago, Madison Square Garden on ginormous cards. And Carlos Prates gets put on those main cards and says, yeah, I'm going to deliver. And that is exactly what he did tonight. Unbelievable performance, beat up and then knocked out Leon Edwards. Just unbelievable. And yeah, he got grappled in the first round and he just said, fine. Next round, we're going to be stood up, and I'm going to put you out. And that is exactly what he did, and it was disgusting. And it was another win to add to Carlos Prates' stock, to the Fighting Nerd stock. I love the Fighting Nerds so much, and it was just awesome to see for Prates. For Leon Edwards, and I've been a Leon Edwards fan for a while, so it was bittersweet, this one. Sometimes the game just passes you. It just does. And we saw it with Usman, and obviously Usman bounced back and beat Buckley. But, sometimes the game just passes these vets. It always happens in MMA. And right now, it just feels like Leon Edwards, with this new wave of welterweights, he just can't, it's just too much for him. He just can't be on the level of these new athletic freak welterweights. And Leon Edwards, who's always kind of been a point fighter, fights at his own pace, very cautious, very technical. That was part of the reason I fell in love with Leon Edwards as a fighter, was just because I really appreciated his technical ability. And you could tell that every strike that he threw, there was logic behind it. We're at a point now where the game has evolved and this division has evolved, where you've got guys who are going to finish the fights. Point fighting just doesn't work, and if you continue to sit back and try to point fight, you're going to have a Carlos Prates who's going to put you out eventually. You're going to have a Michael Morales who's going to put you out eventually, or you're going to have a Sean Brady who's just going to say, F that, I'm just going to grapple you the entire time and then submit you. So the game is past Leon Edwards. It's sad to see, and he's not big enough to move up to welterweight. He's not small enough to go down to lightweight. Welterweight is Leon Edwards' division, and right now the division's passing him. Even though Prates is an extremely dangerous dude, this is what Leon wanted, was to fight a striker. And he tried grappling the striker in the first round and then got knocked out in the second round. So not an ideal night for the Leon Edwards stock, and it's just the beginning of the end of that wave of the welterweight division. Obviously, Colby sucks. Colby Covington is one of the worst fighters on the roster, and he's ranked somehow. Kamaru Usman had a very, very good win against Joaquin Buckley. I still think at this point in Usman's career, it's going to be hard for him to compete with the Moraleses, the Prates, the Garys. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Marty still got it. But, this new wave of welterweight, it's taken over, and it's really, really fun to watch. The main card opener was equally as exciting, and it happened fast. 16 seconds. Benoit Saint-Denis put out Beneil Dariush. I feel for Benny Dariush. Very likable guy. He's from the area where I go to school. That sucked to see it for his sake, but for Benoit Saint-Denis, let's talk about this, because this was a guy about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I thoroughly kind of thought that this guy was a future title caliber fighter. I just did. And maybe I jumped the gun too much off of the Mavrovola head kick, and many people like myself did that. But what we've seen from Benoit Saint-Denis is after the head kick, he lost 2. He got knocked out by Poirier, but he looked good in that fight, so we kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt. And then he fought Moicano, and the Moicano fight was just like this really, really bad showing. And he said about that Moicano fight, there was a lot of pressure on him. Camp wasn't great. He was moving camp, moving coaches, right? There was a lot going on behind the scenes. And we hear fighters say that all the time. So it's kind of hard. We have to take that with a grain of salt when a fighter talks about why they had just lost a fight. But he has now fought 3 times this year in 2025 in a relatively quick amount of time. He fought in May, September, and now November. And in those 3 fights, he has shown he is still the Benoit Saint-Denis. The first one was in Montreal. It was against Kyle Prepelic on very, very short notice. Okay, you know what? You took care of business like you were supposed to. Whatever, move on. Then in September in France, he takes care of Mauricio Ruffi, a just unbelievably talented prospect with a ton of hype on him. And then he disposes of Beneil Dariush the way that he just did. That quickly, one-hitter quitter, just unbelievable. We're back. We're back. The people who believed in Benoit Saint-Denis, we're back, because this dude is unbelievable. He is very well-rounded. He still has holes in his game, but just the physicality, the grappling, and the power he possesses on the feet, it is he's a force to be reckoned with at lightweight, and I think he's going to keep climbing, and it's going to be fun to watch to see if he gets some matchups towards the top of the division with this new revamped coaching gym, all these changes that he's made. So, hell of a win for Benoit Saint-Denis. For Beneil Dariush, man, is this it? He talked about seriously considering retirement had he lost to Moicano. And this is a tough loss to happen. I don't know. And what we've seen from Dariush is it's just like he's fighting these guys, and it's just the power they possess in their hands. He's getting knocked out. Got knocked out by Oliveira, got knocked out by Sarukian, and now knocked out by BSD. And granted, all three of those guys have a lot of power, but if you keep getting knocked out, at some point, it's more on you than it is the opponents you're facing. So I don't know what's next for him. I'd assume they'll probably, if he stays, he'll be at the bottom of the rankings. They'll probably give a prospect who's just outside the rankings, who's trying to break in. They'll give him to Dariush. But yeah, man, that was the main card. 3 unbelievable knockouts, and then the 2 championship fights, which were 2 very well-rounded performances. The prelims, they delivered. They delivered as well, man. Bo Nickel. How about this? How about Bo Nickel? This is a guy who I have not been a fan of, right? Because frankly, I just think the strength of schedule has been pretty pathetic in his career. And I don't think Rodolfo Vieira is exactly I think stylistically this was a very Bo Nickel friendly matchup. But what I saw tonight was some serious improvements in his striking. And I'm not just saying that because he fought an inferior striker in Vieira who kind of just stood in front of him. Bo Nickel, it felt like he was committing to the strikes he was throwing more. And I think what we saw in that Paul Craig fight on the Madison Square Garden card about a year ago was Bo Nickel would kind of he was striking on Paul Craig, but he would never fully commit to his strikes. In this one, he was throwing with intentions, and it wasn't overthrowing, kind of like we saw Malcolm Wellmaker do. I'll talk about him a little bit. It was throwing with power, but staying grounded, staying centered, and doing what you do. And it was amazing. And he landed just an absolutely nasty head kick, put Vieira out immediately. Just awesome. Just an awesome performance by Bo Nickel. It was fun to watch. It was really, really fun to watch. Roman Kopylov, Gregory Rodriguez, RoboCop got the W in this one. RoboCop, because he's so huge and he has so much power, we're used to him, knocking people out like he did to Hermanson in June. But, Kopylov's a difficult cat, and RoboCop took care of it. Aaron Blanchfield, Tracy Cortez. Blanchfield got the sub in round 2. That was impressive. It really was. Cortez was looking really good in that fight. She was really piecing her up, and Blanchfield just found a way, jumped on an opportunity, got a choke from an awkward angle, and then sunk it in, and that was great. She's probably a win away from the title. If you're gonna win and make your claim for the title, you got to get a finish, and she did tonight, and she did it in her fashion, which is submissions. I still think from what we've seen from her, we haven't really seen improvements on the feet. So I want to see that, of course. But, regardless, it was an unbelievable performance by her. And then Malcolm Wellmaker, I thought this was a surefire knockout. Now, granted, I didn't know much about this dude, but let's talk about Ethan Ewing. Bro, this guy came in 48 hours notice and put together just a flawless fight against Malcolm Wellmaker, right? And he ate some shots from Wellmaker. Wellmaker hit him a couple times, but he did an unbelievable job seeing the shots, not standing in front of Wellmaker, and firing off combos. That is the thing that agitates me the most about MMA striking. It's too many people who throw one strike and then back out. When you can throw combos, it is so effective, and it just completely messes up your opponent's rhythm. And Ethan Ewing did it to perfection and came in, upset win, 48 hours notice, and took care of one of the most hyped prospects in the UFC. Awesome. That's what dreams are made of. That was unbelievable. So excited to see what this guy has for the bantamweight division. So excited to see what he does. By the way, this dude just fought on 5 days ago. He fought 5 days ago, got a knockout win, won the A1 belt at A1 Combat in Sacramento, and then 5 days later fights at MSG, short notice, and gets a win against a hype prospect. Just awesome. Awesome. And the craziest thing about it, too, is Malcolm Wellmaker was one of those prospects that was just this scary striker. Well, usually what happens to those prospects is they get grappled. Malcolm Wellmaker lost on the feet in this one. And it was just a difference of striking styles. And Ethan Ewing threw more combos, and it was very, very effective. Wellmaker, this doesn't faze me, right? I think the guy is great. I really do. And I just think that we put so much stock into guys losing fights. It's like, okay, whatever, right? Losses happen in MMA. MMA is a tough sport. Losses happen. We've seen it. Guys come back from losses. Islam Makhachev got knocked out early in his UFC career. Look where he is now, right? So it sucks because this was a winnable matchup for him, especially because he was fighting a guy coming in on short notice. But he'll bounce back and he'll make improvements. He's young in his MMA career. He's only got 11 MMA fights. He hasn't been training MMA for that long. So the Malcolm Wellmaker train is not, obviously it'll be a lot quieter on social media because that's just how the MMA fan base operates, but it's not over by any means. And then other early prelims, Kyle Dawkins got the sub on Gerald Mearshart. That was a good performance. Pat Sabatini beat up Chepe Mariscal. Pat Sabatini has some like legit good wrestling. Fatima Klein, who is one of my favorite prospects in women's MMA. She got a win over Angela Hill. She's breaking into the rankings. Baysangur Susurkayev, the guy who fought within 5 days, Hamzat's boy, got a KO on Eric McConico. Good performance. He's still got some holes in his game. And then Slava Claus lost. He's probably getting cut. He's 8-7-1. And that's that. UFC 322 was awesome. It was awesome. And people are going to look back on this card and book it. They're going to look back on this card in 4 or 5 years, and they're not going to think back to, the main and co-main event. There was a lot of wrestling. It was boring. They're going to look back to this card and say, wow, two of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time, Valentina Shevchenko and Islam Makhachev, got to fight on the same card and won title fights on the same card. That's how this dialogue is going to be 5 years from now when people look back at UFC 322. Not, it was boring. Because if I said this coming into this card, this was the best card of the year for like true mixed martial arts. Like if you truly love the sport and you truly love this game, the way that these matchups were, I thought was fascinating coming in. And it delivered on that front because the top 3 fights of the night, the final 3 fights of the night, I should say, the main, the co-main, and then Brady Morales, all 3 of those fights were not won because of fighters' abilities. They were won because of these fighters' game plans. And Islam's ability to beat up Jack Della Maddalena's calf and limit his movement the rest of the fight. Valentina's game plan of staying outside or taking her down if it gets close, but not forcing the takedowns was unbelievable, especially with the body work, with the body kicks. We know how good Valentina is with those. And then the Morales game plan to stay low and to use the jab to perfection. It was just an unbelievable card if you're just strictly looking at game planning in mixed martial arts as a whole. And that's why I love this sport so much. And there's a lot, you'll meet some people who love boxing, right? And they swear by boxing and they call this cockfighting, or they just don't fully understand the sport. But this is one of those sports that when you understand it and when you start studying the game, right? I tell people I watch UFC, and the people who don't really know much about UFC or they don't know much about MMA, they always give you a look. They're like, oh, you're kind of like one of those bros that loves seeing people get knocked out, which guilty as charged. I do love seeing knockouts. But I love just seeing the technical battles that happen on these UFC cards. And when we get a night of fights like we got tonight, which had a beautiful mix of some highlight reel finishes with some really technical game planning and some just beautiful mixed martial arts, this was my favorite, one of my favorite cards of the year. UFC 314 was pretty good. It might be hard to beat that one, but this is just awesome to watch, man. I had such a blast watching this card. And now we got one more pay-per-view on the year. It's going to be Merab versus Petr Yan. We'll have Joshua Van versus Pantoja. That'll be great. And then we've got 3 more UFC cards in the ESPN era. Then we're moving to Paramount. We're moving to CBS. I don't want to share my thoughts on that because I'm technically an ESPN employee, so I'm mouth zipped. But 3 more cards. UFC Qatar's next week. That's got some fun fights. That's got Arman versus Dan Hooker in the main. In the co-main, we got Ian Gary versus Bilal Muhammad. I'll break down that card, preview it, recap it like I always do. I'll actually be at home for that one, so you'll see a little bit of a different backdrop here when I record that one. But for now, I'm going to get this podcast edited, chopped up. I appreciate everyone being here, as always. If you are here till the end of the podcast, you're a sicko, and that's why I love you. And I'm getting out of here. Peace out, guys.